I wanted to speak about Oded, the researcher rather than the diplomat. And despite his age, Oded had the most creative, surprising, innovating thoughts. And I think that his voice is missed very much here in the Institute. We had a lot of arguments because he was very insistent and opinionated. But the question, what Oded would have said, still echoes throughout the Institute's rooms. Now, regarding the treaty with Jordan, I remember that these days we were in euphoria. It was relatively an easily signed treaty in relation to other agreements. It was based on mutual trust and long relations that preceded the signing of the treaty. It relied on the fact that the Palestinian issue was advanced to a certain extent, and we were able to promote good relations between the states. But in the course of the years, the challenges and difficulties, I would say, actually amounted. And in this panel, we will try to look at them. It's hard to review 30 years with the short time we have, but we will still try to look at the major milestones in the relationship and also try to look to the future. We have an honorable representation of ambassadors to Jordan, and they, of course, should be the ones to tell us what was and how. I will invite them according to the order of their service in the embassy. We'll begin with Ambassador Jacob Rosen, who actually inaugurated the embassy in 1994. He is also a demographic mapping consultant. Please, Jacob. You will also be seated according to alphabetic order. Second in line is my friend, Ambassador Eynat Shlein, head of the MASHAV. She served a number of positions. She was an ambassador to Jordan in the years 2015 to 2018. Ambassador Amir Weissbrod, who came to Jordan after Eynat and served as ambassador between 2018 and 2021. He is nowadays the Deputy Director General, UN and International Organizations Division. And last, the currently presiding Ambassador Rogel Rachman, who began his role in December 2023. In light of the war, he resides mainly in Israel, but it will be interesting to speak with you as well. I will try to ask you two questions. We are short in time. The first will deal with milestones in the course of the years, and the second question will look to the future. We'll begin with you, Yaakov. I think the question that should be asked is, of course, to ask you to tell us about the inauguration of the embassy and the first days in the embassy. Please tell us the interesting things. Thank you, Orna. It's good to see you. Justice Eli Rubinstein. Well, shortly, I served in the embassy twice, 4 years under King Hussein and 4 years under King Abdallah, with a gap of 6 or 7 years in between. So I am able to compare between things, and also we can learn something for the future. First of all, opening an embassy in an Arab capital, I won't say it is a challenge, but it is very interesting. Usually, when we open an embassy, there is a local Jewish community, an expat community, businessmen, diplomats, someone to whisper on your ear to get you connected. In Jordan, we had nothing. The only Israelis that were there were Israeli women that married those who were released in the Jibril transaction, and they just came to ask for Israeli passports for their children after the embassy was opened. So we came there. We didn't have a team, only an officer who was with us in Egypt, so he knew Arabic. So this Polish accented Jewish nerd came over there, and he had to deal with 5 or 4 teams. I had to cope with Judge Rubinstein and the negotiation team. There was the military attaches team. There were the water people, and no one to this day knows how they work, but they do it so quietly that we can't see them. And of course, we had a direct contact between Eitan Haber of blessed memory and Colonel Shukri, who were the security officers of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and Prime Minister and King Hussein. So we had to work our way to find someone to listen to us. And of course, many things were confidential and secretive. And as is common, everyone held his cards close to his chest. We had to deal with the Minister of Foreign Affairs Bureau. They had some ties and connections. We had connections with Prince Hassan, who was deemed as heir to King Hussein. So we had to make a way, find who to talk to. Things were happening without our knowledge, and we just accidentally heard about them. The Allenby Bridge director was Ali Ziv, and I knew him since the time that he managed the Rafiq checkpoint. And so I had a mole to notify me on people coming. So slowly, Judge Eli Rubinstein understood that it's time to give the wheel to others. And then we had Ambassador Shamir, who was ambassador to Egypt. And he maintained the contact with Hani Mulki, who later became the Minister of Water Issues. And then regretfully, Prime Minister Rabin was assassinated, and that very intimate connection between the Prime Minister's Bureau in Israel and King Hussein was diminished. And just the military coordination was the most stable aspect. So for 4 years, King Hussein was personally committed to the peace process. King Abdallah, he inherited the treaty, so he had other more important matters. And when we came to Rabat Ammon in 1994, in Jordan, there were 4.2 million residents. When I came back there in 2006, there were almost 6 million residents because of what had happened in Iraq. And today, I read in the Wikipedia, I don't know if we could count on that, there are 11 million residents there. And water, the quantity of water that Jordan is able to supply to its people has not grown. You can understand what it does to the Israeli-Jordanian relations. Thank you very much. Eynat, you too were present in the inauguration of the embassy, but let's move on to the strategic level. Please characterize the relationship, the problems, and the implications to the relationship in the course of the years. Well, the interesting thing in this panel is that, but for Rogel, who didn't have the chance, we all served twice in the Jordanian embassy. Amir and myself were juniors there, and then later returned as ambassadors, and Yaakov was twice ambassador there. When I came to the embassy in 1995 initially, and I'm sitting next to the person who taught me everything I know about diplomacy. I entered a very complex world, and everything was new, everything was exciting, everything was groundbreaking. There were many frustrations and issues, but we did feel we're doing something preliminary for us and the Jordanian population. And just like Yaakov, I too have a certain perspective. I left Jordan in the summer of 1997 and returned to it in the summer of 2018. And in the course of these years, changes have taken place in Jordan in terms of population and demography, and also in terms of the Israeli-Jordanian relations. It's not only King Hussein versus King Abdallah. The systems were different. The atmosphere was different. In the 90s, the embassy behaved like an embassy. There were always security constraints, but we would roam around freely. In the days before Waze, me and my family would travel across Jordan and meet people, and everyone was friendly. When I came back in 2015, I came back to a fortress that nobody could visit, nobody could head out without accompaniment, and that is an indication of the rift in the relationship and their different character. If we look at the trends, then in 1994, 1995, there was a euphoria among ourselves and the Jordanian leadership. Maybe in the next panel, we will be able to ask what happened and why. But I can just say that the Jordanian approach was very friendly and curious, but it wasn't euphoric. And in 2015, there was there was still a support in the peace treaty with Israel in Jordan, but there was this awakening from the dream of a new Middle East, not only in relation to the Israeli-Jordanian relationships, but many people initially felt that this is going to come true. And we remember all the plans for huge regional programs. We talk about connectivity nowadays, but in 1996, people probably remember the projects initiated by Vardy and Ben Benisti and Eliakim. I have a copy if you want to take a look at it. These things looked attainable at the time. And if I'll just add my 2 pennies in favor of Iran, who was my ambassador as well, Oded was the head of the Red Wing Economic Collaboration Division. And there, in the meetings of that committee, we clearly discussed the connectivity between among all across the Middle East, electricity, water, of course, and transportation. And this has disappeared because the Middle East has changed completely. I won't say why or discuss it, but our ability to generate change was huge in the 90s and it was restricted. And part of the responsibility for that change is ours. And part of it is the Jordanians. We cannot ignore that, but I do think that we missed out on something big here. And just another thing. Last week, I had an opportunity to read several of the documents that we've written in 1994, and it was very interesting to look at what then looked like a central issue that if only it will be solved, then we'll have such long, sustainable peace. So Eliakim Rubinstein noted water, security, borders, and the refugee issue that was pushed to the margins in favor of future agreements. So security, in 1994, everyone understood that everything will be okay, and it is indeed okay. The water issues were solved, and the border issues were solved, and ostensibly, we should have had a golden path since then. And if King Hussein was very concerned in the 90s by what the Syrians will say on the one hand, and on the other hand, what will happen if the Syrians will move ahead and he will not, then nowadays in 2024, this looks ridiculous. And then it was significant and we had an opportunity to revolutionize things, but this opportunity no longer exists. And there are various reasons to that. And I would like to say that the essential failure that we are responsible for is the lack of a civil pillar. If we had a civil pillar to support, we cannot live on our sword. It's not enough for war, neither for peace. And our peace is founded upon the security aspects of the peace. And these mega projects that were discussed in late 90s and early 2000, the Reddit, the Channel of the Seas, or the Jordan Gate project, or the airport, of course, these projects that could have served as strategic anchors for peace regretfully did not come to fruition, and they are regretfully the missing pillar in this relationship, and that's a shame. Thank you. Amir, give us your perspective about the relationship with an emphasis on your period of your tenureship, and maybe in regards to the relationship with the Gulf states as well. Well, what Eynat said is true. I came after the crisis in 2018, but I do think several things. Eynat spoke about the civil pillar. Even after the crisis and when renewing the relationship, we spoke about several projects that should be realized, the Channel of the Seas, the Jordan Gate project. These things were not realized, and that was disappointing because a Jordanian perspective was give us, do for us. But when they looked at it from their perspective, the most important thing for them was economics. And when you look at the public, rather than the strategic interest of the regime, the public seeks financials. And there's also the political issue that cannot be ignored. In Jordan, the population is 64% Palestinian, and that has an impact. And the third thing is approach. And for the Jordanians, the ability to meeting the relatives in Israel was very important, and there was the expectation that these things will come to fruition, especially in the water aspect, and that did not come to fruition. And I do think that the public opinion in Jordan was a failure. Jordan is less important geostrategically after the Arab Spring. The Gulf states have risen in power, and when the Jordanians look around, they look at their neighbors from the south, Saudi Arabia, or from the north, the Emirates. And the Jordanians were always the mediators between Israel and the Arab world, and they have lost that position to a certain extent. And all this was also impactful on the relationship. Now, when we look forward, as Oded said, yes, the Abraham Accords created a different reality. And oftentimes, our partners in Egypt and Jordan look at it as if they've lost their position, their seniority. We approach the Gulf oftentimes due to practical reasons and because it was easier to do business with the Gulf. They were much more pragmatic than Egypt and Jordan, but they felt neglected and left behind. It is partially their fault, I must say. So, as Eynat said, they have to do the adaptations and make a compromise as well. But if we're looking to the future, even if we will reach an agreement with Saudi Arabia and other states, we have to remember our partner. Eliakim Rubinstein spoke about honor. We always have to pay our 2 cents to honor. For example, through pilgrims to Mecca and others. So it's not only connectivity and economy, it's a lot to do with honor and communication because they want to be a player. They always remember that that the Jordanians will remember that they were not partner in Oslo. So if we reach an agreement with Saudi Arabia, we should reserve a place to the Jordanians. We should give them a role to play. They're playing an important role in Gaza now with the humanitarian aid. I think the role should not only be economic or financial, but also political. They want to feel that they are mediators and things don't bypass them. Thank you. Rogel, let's jump forward to the coming year. I would like you to refer to how the present war impacted relationship between Israel and Jordan and how the relationship looks nowadays. Well, then one of the minuses in speaking last is that all the smart things have already been said. So of course I will agree and reiterate everything that has been noted already. The relationship between Israel and Jordan in the past year or 13 months. You don't need to be a big genius in order to know that they are not where we want them to be. And the reasons, of course, are understandable. We have encountered challenges of our own, but we also understand the Jordanian challenges because they orient their conduct in accordance to circumstances, and we should be able to cope with that. Jordan, on the one hand, is a leader, and it has a central role in the activity against the war and against Israel's activity in Gaza and Lebanon. The Jordanian Minister of Foreign Affairs is often very blunt in his expressions. He's leading this line with words that we could not always accept and a rhetorics of genocide, of starvation. So they are leaders in that sense. They are also very active in the international arena in these respects. So we should look at it also from their perspective. This is their way of fulfilling a role, taking on a role of expressing their commitment to the Palestinian, and that is very important for them, understandably. And this also enables them to maintain the strategic importance of the relationships, and they do explain it that way. The calls that we've heard oftentimes in Jordan to the abolishment of the Arava Valley Treaty are answered with an explanation that the relationship and the treaty is of strategic importance to Jordan. And that is important because in face of all these tensions, they hold strong to the treaty. And I connect to what my predecessors here said. The importance that the royal house had in the signing of the agreements, I don't think it's diminished. They are still committed to the treaty, and they still do understand its importance, its strategic importance. And I do think that we here, despite everything, do understand that as well. Thank you. There was always a gap between the hidden and concealed in the relationship between Israel and Jordan. I do think that was prominent in the last year. So before we start talking about what should be improved, I think that the relationship between the countries was always accompanied by a special personal relationship between the leaders, between King Hussein and Rabin, Prime Minister Rabin. There was mutual trust, and that was different between King Hussein and Prime Minister Peres. And also, we could compare with the relationship between King Abdallah and Prime Minister Bibi. Now, you shouldn't have served under both leaders. Maybe you could relate to the Jordanian side. What differences did you see between the conduct of the two kings in their relation to Israel mainly? Well, then, first of all, the warm relations between King Hussein and Prime Minister Rabin were manifested only in the relationship between the individuals that they've appointed to conduct the negotiation. The personal relationship between Dr. Faisal and Judge Rubinstein were close and friendly to the end. The friendly relationship between Ali Shukri and Eitan Haber. I wrote a book about that. You don't need to buy it, of course. You can read it on Google Books in English. The relationship there was crucial and the warm relationship between Ephraim Halevi and the king and others who stood alongside us in the MASHAV affair. All this disappeared. King Abdullah had to deal with a new generation of people who no longer had that connection. Amir, Weissbrod, and Eynat and myself too, when we returned to Jordan. We already had the social network. So on the first evening when I returned to Jordan, I already had dinner with friends, and that no longer existed, and it made it very difficult because the leaks, and I have to say here, the leaks in Israel has paralyzed the Jordanians. They were burned so many times that they were no longer willing to tell us what they wanted, because after telling us what they wanted once or twice before they were back home, they could already hear about this on the radio in Israel. And then later, when the Jordanians denied everything, in Israel, they were reaffirmed. I talked oftentimes with people who were close to the king. I couldn't, I think I understood what they wanted, but no one had the courage because they were afraid. CP Livni, when she was appointed as Minister of Foreign Affairs, she said, I want to meet the seniors to speak with them. I told her, well, they won't tell you anything because of the leaks. She told this will not happen, that they were unwilling to meet her people. A maximum, they were willing to meet her on Allenby Bridge. So we have to remember that the intimacy, the trust disappeared, and these leaks are detrimental till this day, and I have to say it, because it's impossible. They will not speak with us, maybe behind the scenes, somewhere hidden. So now we have to guess what's good for the Jordanians. I guess some of us know, but they'll never tell us. Secondly, that story of 60% Palestinian in Jordan. Defining in Jordan who's Palestinian, that's harder than defining a Jew in the state of Israel. So for the Jordanians, we need to ask people how they feel and what they think about themselves. Okay. But the demographics, 60%, that's non-existent, 11 million people there. In 2003, 2004, many Iraqi immigrants came, and after the civil war in Syria, more immigrants came in. And the most important thing is that they have nowhere to return to. The Syrians are not going back home. Maybe 50,000 have returned, and slowly they are absorbed within the Jordanian population through marriage. We see it in the schools. There was a private school bus disaster from Rabat Ammon, and 7 among the 25 casualties had Iraqi names. So slowly, the Jordanian population is changing, and the original Jordanian population is feeling like a minority on the verge of
So Eynat, we talked about relationships and different characteristics. I know it's very difficult, but try to look into the future and tell us what can we do differently, what the policy should be, the strategy of Israel when it comes to Jordan. What shall we do really? I think, well, you can understand exactly what we need to do. It's like it's obvious. Things that were supposed to hold us together for years and years were obviously relationships that are not just between the leaderships, but between the peoples. It sounds so simple, but this is not simple at all. Peace is between peoples, not just governments. And during those years, we worked very hard in order to fulfill that. And we encountered a lengthy list of barriers from both directions, by the way. So there are a lot of pockets of cooperation, wonderful corporations and personal relations that continued for years. Even in light of the crisis, we have Osama Samurai, who is the father of the connection between Eynat and Aqaba. And until today, for decades, he works on these connections between two cities and the business connections. We have Shlomi Fogel here, who is leading until today very complicated businesses that contribute to Jordanian economy. And there's a lengthy list of people that participate actively in the reinforcement of those relations. But the fruit of peace, this is also another cliche that is attributed to the peace process, were never echoed properly in Israel and in Jordan. And in Jordan, obviously, it's a story of our life. As representatives of Israel in Amman, the fruits of peace, when I returned to Jordan in 2016 and 15, the locals asked me with pain, where's the fruit of peace? Where are the results? There's a whole jungle of these trees that are bearing fruit, but it's all under the table. It goes back again to the military and security and civilian pillars. And the very fact that there's quite majority that the late King Hussein talked about, the quite majority that supported tremendously because the king said, or maybe because they understood the economical advantages in the 90s, this quite majority did not waste it out because a noisy minority, I don't know what the percentage of it in the population, but now it's very active with their keyboards and their protests and etc. This noisy minority covers any possibility of hearing the positive aspects, and there's some kind of negative circle, vicious circle really, and many benefit from the connections with Israel, but they don't dare to voice out their voice or to expose it. I had a fantasy in the past, and again, a few years ago already, that if one day we would be able to say that anyone that worked, those that worked or work with Israel, was in Israel for tourism or health or business, or someone from the first year of their family were in Israel would stand up one day and for a second they will leave their house and suddenly the streets will be filled with people. Obviously the fantasy is completely unrealistic, and then everyone will be looking to the left and the right and they will see that so many people actually benefit from. Everyone does it, it's legitimate, it's okay, but now they all do it in a clandestine manner. In reality, when there are meetings or encounters between former generals, for example, and people that were the leading top 10, without doubt, for decades of Jordanian security, from the right families, from trans-Jordanian origins, ethnic clearly, trans-Jordanian roots, powerful in politics. When those people, some of them, their families don't even know that they visited or visit Israel. That's exactly. And this is after 30 years, of 25 years of peace. It says, well, we need to ask some questions here. So first of all, the Jordanian regime chose peace. The monarchy chose peace. The royal dynasty chose peace, and they echoed that for many years. And afterwards, challenges began, and there were challenges, obviously, there were challenges, and they were very visible. And gradually, all the supporters of peace started to withdraw. The ministers of water apologized at the meeting with Israel to receive their annual water quota. And there are multiple examples of those particular behaviors, and we failed on the public level, in fact. At least we could have introduced the strategic anchors. And the strategic anchors I mentioned before, you can't disconnect those anchors. We have a very strong, powerful anchor, which is the gas agreement. It's a wonderful anchor. Jordan benefits tremendously, economically speaking, significantly. We also benefit not just the client, but we have good relations. Again, this is good neighborly relations. Both parties enjoy and benefit. Those are fruit of peace. But Red or Dead project, Red Dead project could have been a public fruit of peace, and clear one that brings more water to Jordanians. People worked on this project for decades, and unfortunately, I dedicated really thousands of hours of my life and years of my life to this project. But this project, at a certain stage, died and was buried. It was dead and buried in 2018, and I think that it was a mistake, because it's a strategic anchor that you can't disengage or hide because of differences of personalities or heritage or some kind of regional crisis. When there is such an anchor, you can't disengage from it. It's a dead project. It's no longer a Red Dead project. It's a dead project. We can revive it, really. Well, resuscitation, obviously, you can look at Ben Gurion, and I think Monty Python, they have also a comment on that. And I think in The Princess Bride, is it completely dead or dead? I was involved in this period of time on this topic, really, in the Council of National Security. We buried it, Israelis. Well, that's what you say. That's what she said. But this is just one example, really. The airport, Eynat Aqaba airfield is another example. The Gate of Jordan, which was a fantasy in '96, I went together with Gili Dekel to woo banks for investment in the Gulf in order to persuade them to invest into Jordan to fund this project. There were ideas, beautiful ideas really, that floated, and it died for some period of time and then came to life again in the years when I was ambassador, and it still lives on a certain level of artificial ventilation. But if it would have been realized in thousands, probably hundreds of thousands, workplaces would have been generated in the stricken by unemployment northern Western Jordan. It would have been an anchor, but the guilt is not just upon Israel, by the way. Jordanians have definitely a part in that. But it's mostly Israel to blame. I will not repeat what I told you. But again, Israel is to blame, as you said, but you said that. But when we're looking into the future, really, what is missing is not just respect, it's trust. It's a personal trust, and it's also the systematic trust. And the systematic trust, I think, is lacking here completely. I'm being a diplomat, really, so we need to look for how to build it. We need a new spirit. Is it realistic at that point? I can hardly believe into it, really. But we need to keep optimism, a certain level of optimism. We are diplomats, really. It's not impossible, but it requires a strategic revolution in thinking. It requires targets, and it requires fulfilling your promises. Eynat, it's extremely important what you said, but our time is very short, unfortunately, and I want to allow Amir and others to comment. Amir, if you would like to comment on a few aspects of improvement or change of policy that could have been embedded, maybe, or to do something different. I think we have really, this pillar is built of two aspects, energy and water. We need a strategic water project, really. And we talk about this prosperity, really, with Emirates, and I hope this project will be fulfilled. And I hope that energy will be reinforced as well with prosperity. I think we need, again, a third pillar as well, but this is dependent on the Jordanians, really, and it's called agriculture, I think. In many aspects, I think we can find here a win-win. It's mostly Jordanians, by the way, end of it, that is problematic. The ideal, it would have been that the Jordanians we would be raising a crop in Jordan, and there's a win-win, and then export it to Europe through Haifa. From our experience, the problem here is on Jordanian end, really, because of various reasons. Again, as I said, Jordanians also need to switch something in their mindset. Again, why are you going to the Gulf countries? Because it's easy to work with them, really. You need to decide politics or business. It's very difficult, sometimes. So that's the thing, really. I think other matters, the civilian pillar can be reinforced, and they're important. They're happening. The workers project, people are looking for livelihood. And workers in Eynat and Aqaba is a successful project. We need to increase it into additional workers. Obviously, we need to preserve the security matters. It should be done very thoroughly. But this project actually worked quite well. People, it can be also on the Dead Sea in the north as well. And here, by the way, Jordanians could be more flexible as well. If Jordanians would allow Jordanians to go through Allenby Bridge to the Dead Sea, even if they think that it's still not the sovereign border between the State of Israel and Jordan, if they would allow them, it could have been actually something that would help. But they're also people. Visas are important. Jordanians, first thing, as an ambassador, people come to you all the time is, I need a visa. His name, Abu Afta, this is the father of connections, Wasta, Abu Wasta. It's the father of the connections here. They come with the passports. So we need to try, while preserving, obviously, all the matters of security, etc., etc. We need to try from Israeli perspective, but again, I want to give you this. But is connected to a few things. First of all, I think that for Jordanians, it's very much connected to the Palestinian topic. You can't disconnect it. Obviously, if we'll have the civilian pillar and other things will flourish, you need to look at demographics. Yaakov, I don't agree with you. Palestinian Jordanians, everything that is happening here influences them directly. In the end of the day, it's something that, again, and here it will always be something that hovers at the background. You can't ignore it, really. The civilian pillar can't really grow and unrelated to those matters. It's very much connected because of who they are, really. And the last matter, we need to make a decision. Jordanians need to decide what do they want. This is the Jordanian part, really. This is their thing. What we didn't do, we did do. We talked about that, but the Jordanians, the biggest challenge is economical for them. Jordan has to be much more creative on this topic. Again, as I said, Jordan has to, when there are good things, they must echo it. Even when good things happen, they didn't echo them to the public. And the public says, well, as Eynat said, yeah, so Jordanian part, they have their own part in this reality. In the Middle Eastern changing reality with the Gulf, they started to understand that, but they also need to consider the considerations of survivability, but they need to adjust. They need to adjust as well. So, Rogel, if you can talk a little bit about, in a few sentences maybe, about the day after the war, the current war. What shall we expect from the Jordanians, really? I think that in this war, really, we saw some kind of dissonance that highlighted the importance of Jordan from strategic perspective and military perspective, and the level of military cooperation in comparison to what's happening in public, as you discussed it before. How will it unfold in the future? When I think about the relationships between Israel and Jordan, what comes to my mind immediately what my teacher said in 8th grade, and my mother was there. The child does not fulfill his potential, but I'm optimistic. So I feel the same really in this case. During the war, this war, we saw as well things that happened, mostly heard about things that happened, whether in businesses that continued to work. And I'm not getting now in the strategic matter. I'm talking about the same civilian pillar that is extremely important that we talked about. And Eynat and Amir discussed it, projects and business people that continued to work during this war until someone, I don't know, took a picture of a box of vegetables and published it, and there was a huge ordeal around it. And it was silence that was hushed as well. So I think the problem that we failed really, and in Israel as well, the vast majority of the public, the people don't understand the depth of the importance of relationships with Jordan. And I find myself talking today in Israel with Israelis, say, we don't need them. Those, I don't know, why do we need them? We give them this and that. Why do we even need that? We don't give them anything. We didn't internalize, like we Israelis, we didn't understand the importance of this country, Jordan, and the Jordanians, the common layman in Jordan, obviously, they have the Palestinian case as well. They didn't internalize as well the importance of what they get and what they can get from this particular connection with Israel. Therefore, I think that day after, the projects, the large projects, but also the smaller projects, those businessmen that move few tons of vegetables from here to there. And as has been mentioned, the project of the workers, this is an example, perfect example in my eyes, to what could have been done and what should be done during the war as well, by the way. I don't know whether we are understanding it in depth, but there were 60,000 people evacuated to Eynat that ran away from a slaughter, from the massacre, and they were in hotels in Eynat, and they received service from Jordanian citizens that came there, and we didn't hear about even one problem. This business worked, and it still works. And therefore, we think that this is the model we need to promote. We talk about that to actually bring it to the north. We started it before the war. And we sat down and we talked about it even during the last month with the heads of councils and here in Israel to increase the need and to try move it forward. I know that there is a lot of interest on Jordanian side, and if it will happen, I think it will be another very important pillar that we can actually use in order to tie connections with Jordan even closer. And the Gate of Jordan project, yeah. Before the war, we talked about it and we visited and etc. For 30 years it's going on, isn't it? Yes, there were ups and downs indeed, of course. And the current wave is the way of, yeah, let's do it. You know what? Let's do it with a more expanded outline. personally, the Gate of Jordan project, as my friends know here, my basic required characteristic to be Israeli diplomat is to be optimistic. That's what you need to be a diplomat. That's why I'm optimistic. Well, what I can wish to quickly go back to Amman, that's the only I wish I could share with you. So I could have sat with you for hours, really, friends. But I think that one thing we agree upon completely, the importance of the relationships with Jordan. And I think in general, in light of 30 years, they've been preserved stable, regardless of the challenges and difficulties and all the negativity and difficulties that, and you showed here a few aspects that we must think again anew of how to improve and deepen and to correct and amend. And I think this last war proved to what extent this relationship means a lot to us. If it wasn't clear to you, Israeli population. So this connection, direct connection, attacks from Iran, for example, proved that Jordan has a tremendous importance. And moving to the next directions, we have to quote Rabin. I remember his famous address while signing the peace agreement in Araba. He talked about, we are the soldiers that signed, we are the leaders that signed the agreement, and we opened the path, we paved the path. But those that must continue and pave it are in fact the peoples of Jordan and Israel, and hopefully one day it will happen during the next decade. So thank you all.